Duke Leonard Hartwell had grown accustomed to the whispered conversations that followed him wherever he went. Conversations that stopped abruptly when people noticed his approach. Conversations filled with pity, speculation, and the uncomfortable shuffling of those who no longer knew how to treat a man who had once commanded every room he entered. For 3 years, since the riding accident that had stolen the use of his legs, he had become London society's most tragic figure. The brilliant, devastatingly handsome Duke, reduced to watching life from the sidelines. So when Miss Amelia Carter appeared at his study door that crisp October morning in 1824, her chin raised with determination and her blue eyes blazing with something that looked suspiciously like defiance, Leonard assumed she had come to deliver another pitying invitation he would politely decline. He never imagined that this spirited young woman, who had been watching him from across ballrooms for months, seeing not a broken man but a duke whose intelligence and dignity remained undiminished, was about to ask him something that would change both their lives forever. "Your Grace," she said, her voice steady despite the revolutionary nature of her request, "I need an escort to Lady Pemberton's wedding, and I would be honored if you would accompany me." What happened next would not only shock every member of the ton, but prove that sometimes the most extraordinary love stories begin with the simplest acts of courage. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of Hartwell House, casting long shadows across the mahogany desk where Duke Leonard Hartwell sat reviewing his correspondence. At 31, he possessed the kind of classical handsomeness that had once made him the most sought-after bachelor in London. Dark hair that fell in waves across his forehead, piercing grey eyes that seemed to see straight through to a person's soul, and features so perfectly sculpted they belonged in a Renaissance painting. But now, 3 years after the hunting accident that had changed everything, those same features were often marked by a weariness that spoke of battles fought in solitude. Leonard set aside another invitation, this one to Lord Pemberton's autumn ball, without bothering to read the details. He had stopped attending social functions shortly after his accident, unable to bear the mixture of pity and discomfort that greeted him wherever he went. The ton, which had once hung on his every word and competed for his attention, now seemed to view him as a tragic reminder of how quickly fortune could change. "Your Grace," his butler Morrison appeared in the doorway with his usual dignified bearing. "Miss Amelia Carter has called to see you. She says it's a matter of some importance." Leonard's eyebrows rose in surprise. Miss Amelia Carter was the daughter of a successful merchant who had recently purchased an estate in the countryside. She was known in society for her intelligence, her charitable work, and her complete disregard for the social climbing that occupied most young women of her station. But Leonard couldn't imagine what business she might have with him. "Show her in," he said, quickly straightening his cravat and ensuring his wheelchair was positioned properly behind his desk. Miss Carter entered the room with the confident stride of a woman who knew her own mind. She was perhaps 25, with honey blonde hair arranged in a simple but elegant style and the kind of natural beauty that needed no enhancement. Her dress was fashionable but not ostentatious, a deep blue that matched her eyes and was cut with the modest necklines and long sleeves appropriate for a morning call. "Your Grace," she said, offering a curtsy that was respectful but not obsequious. "Thank you for receiving me." "Miss Carter," Leonard replied, inclining his head, "please sit down. To what do I owe the pleasure of your visit?" Amelia settled herself in the chair across from his desk, her posture straight and her hands folded calmly in her lap. But Leonard noticed the slight tension in her shoulders that suggested she was not as composed as she appeared. "Your Grace, I have come to ask you a favor," she began, her voice clear and direct, "though I suspect you may find my request unusual." "I'm intrigued," Leonard said, leaning back in his chair. "Please, continue." "Lady Pemberton's wedding is next week," Amelia said. "As you know, it's expected to be one of the grandest celebrations of the season. I find myself in need of an escort, and I was hoping, that is, I would be greatly honored if you would consider accompanying me." Leonard stared at her for a long moment, certain he had misheard. "I beg your pardon?" "I would like you to be my escort to Lady Pemberton's wedding," Amelia repeated, her chin lifting slightly as though preparing for battle. "Miss Carter," Leonard said carefully, "I'm not certain you understand. I don't attend social functions anymore. I haven't for some time." "I'm aware of that," Amelia replied calmly, "which is precisely why I'm asking." Leonard felt a flash of irritation. "If this is some sort of charitable gesture—" "It's not," Amelia interrupted firmly. "Your Grace, may I speak plainly?" "By all means." "I have been watching you," Amelia said, and Leonard felt his eyebrows rise again. At the few events you've attended over the past 3 years, I've watched how people treat you, how they whisper and stare and treat you as though you've become invisible, and I've watched how you've responded, with dignity, with grace, with more patience than most of those people deserve. Miss Carter, I'm not finished, Amelia said, her blue eyes flashing. I've also watched how you've withdrawn from society, how you've allowed other people's discomfort to dictate your choices, and I think it's a terrible waste. Leonard felt his temper beginning to rise. A waste of what, exactly? Of you, Amelia said simply. Your intelligence, your wit, your presence. Before your accident, you were one of the most influential men in London. You had the ear of politicians, the respect of your peers, the ability to shape opinion and policy. Now you sit in this house, managing your estates and your investments, but contributing nothing to the world that desperately needs your voice. And you think attending a wedding will somehow remedy that? Leonard asked, his voice cold. I think, Amelia said, meeting his gaze steadily, that it's time you reminded society that you're still here, still relevant, still the Duke of Hartwell, regardless of whether you can walk. Leonard was quiet for a long moment, studying this remarkable young woman who had just delivered the most direct speech he had heard in years. And why? He asked finally. Do you care what happens to me? Amelia's composure faltered slightly, and Leonard caught a glimpse of something vulnerable in her expression before she composed herself again. Because someone should, she said quietly, and because I believe that great men don't become less great simply because their circumstances change. You don't know me, Miss Carter, Leonard said. You don't know what kind of man I am, don't I? Amelia challenged. I know that you've continued to manage your estates with the same attention to detail you always had. I know that you've increased the wages of your workers and improved their housing, even when other landowners were cutting costs. I know that you've quietly funded 3 different charitable organizations without seeking any recognition for your contributions. Leonard stared at her in amazement. How do you know all of that? Because I make it my business to know about the people I admire, Amelia said simply. Your Grace, I'm not asking you to escort me out of pity or charity. I'm asking because I believe you're still the most interesting man in London, and I would be honored to have you by my side. Even though I'm in a wheelchair, Leonard asked bluntly. Especially because you're in a wheelchair, Amelia replied without hesitation. Because it means you've faced adversity and survived it. Because it means you understand what it's like to be underestimated and dismissed. Because it means you have depths that most people can't even imagine. Leonard found himself speechless. In 3 years, no one had spoken to him with such directness, such complete lack of pity or condescension. This young woman was looking at him not as a tragic figure to be pitied, but as a man to be respected. Miss Carter, he said finally, what you're suggesting, it would cause quite a stir. People would talk. People always talk, Amelia said with a slight smile. The question is whether we give them something worth talking about. And what makes you think I want to give society something to talk about? Because, Amelia said, rising from her chair with fluid grace, I think you're tired of being invisible. I think you're tired of letting other people's limitations define your life. And I think, deep down, you miss being part of the world. Leonard looked at her for a long moment. This extraordinary woman who had just challenged everything he had accepted about his life for the past 3 years. If I were to agree to this, he said slowly, what exactly would you expect from me? I would expect you to be yourself, Amelia said simply. Brilliant, witty, charming, all the things that made you legendary in society before your accident. I would expect you to remind everyone in that ballroom why you were once the most sought-after man in London. And in return, I get the privilege of being escorted by the most fascinating man at the wedding, Amelia said. And perhaps, if we're very lucky, we both get to prove that courage comes in many forms. Leonard was quiet for a long moment, weighing her words. The thought of returning to society, of facing all those pitying stares and whispered comments, filled him with dread. But there was something about this woman, something about her absolute conviction that he was still worth knowing, that made him want to be the man she seemed to see. Very well, he said finally. I accept your invitation, Miss Carter. The smile that lit up Amelia's face was radiant. Thank you, Your Grace. You won't regret this. I hope you're right, Leonard said, though privately he was already beginning to wonder what he had gotten himself into. I am, Amelia said with confidence. Your Grace, may I ask you something? Of course. When was the last time you danced? Leonard felt his heart clench. I don't dance anymore, Miss Carter, for obvious reasons. But you could, Amelia said thoughtfully. If you wanted to. There are ways to dance from a wheelchair. I've seen it done. Miss Carter. Think about it, Amelia said, moving toward the door. I'll call for you at 7 o'clock on Saturday evening. And your Grace? Yes? Wear your best evening clothes. We're going to remind London society what a real duke looks like. After she left, Leonard sat in his study for a long time, staring out the window at the bustling London street beyond. For 3 years, he had convinced himself that his life was over, that his accident had reduced him to a shadow of his former self. But Amelia Carter had just looked at him and seen something else entirely. Not a broken man, but a duke whose worth had nothing to do with his ability to walk. The question now was whether he had the courage to be the man she seemed to believe he could be. Preparation and doubt. The days leading up to Lady Pemberton's wedding passed in a blur of preparation and mounting anxiety for Leonard. He found himself second-guessing his decision to accept Amelia's invitation dozens of times, but each time he considered sending his regrets, he remembered the conviction in her blue eyes and found himself unable to disappoint her. Your Grace, his valet Thomas said, as he laid out Leonard's evening clothes for the final fitting, if I may say so, it's wonderful to see you preparing for a social engagement again. Is it? Leonard asked wryly, examining himself in the mirror, as Thomas adjusted his jacket. The formal evening wear, black tailcoat, white waistcoat and perfectly tied cravat, was impeccable, but Leonard couldn't shake the feeling that he looked like he was playing dress-up. Indeed, sir, Thomas replied with the familiarity of a servant who had been with the family for 20 years. You've been hiding away in this house for far too long. Miss Carter has done you a great service by drawing you back into society. Has she? Leonard mused. Or has she simply set me up for public humiliation? Your Grace, Thomas said firmly, you are still the Duke of Hartwell. Your accident changed your mobility, not your worth. Anyone who can't see that isn't worth your consideration. Leonard smiled slightly at his valet's fierce loyalty. You sound like Miss Carter. Then Miss Carter is a woman of excellent judgment, Thomas replied without hesitation. That evening, as Leonard waited in his drawing room for Amelia's arrival, he found himself more nervous than he had been since his first speech in the House of Lords 15 years earlier. He had spent the afternoon reviewing the guest list for the wedding, preparing himself for the reactions he was likely to encounter. Some would be surprised, others pitying, and still others would probably whisper about the spectacle of a duke in a wheelchair attempting to escort a young lady. When Morrison announced Miss Carter's arrival, Leonard felt his breath catch. She appeared in the doorway wearing an evening gown of deep emerald silk that complemented her blonde hair and blue eyes perfectly. The dress was elegant and sophisticated, with the high neckline and long sleeves appropriate for the occasion, but it was the confidence with which she wore it that truly took his breath away. Your Grace, she said, offering a curtsy that was both respectful and graceful. You look magnificent. As do you, Miss Carter, Leonard replied, maneuvering his wheelchair forward. Though I confess I'm having second thoughts about this entire enterprise. Nerves are perfectly natural, Amelia said with a warm smile. I'm nervous too. You? Nervous? Leonard found that hard to believe. You seem utterly fearless. Appearances can be deceiving, Amelia said with a slight laugh. Your Grace, may I tell you something? Of course. I've never actually attended a society wedding of this magnitude before, she admitted. My family's wealth is recent, and while we've been accepted into certain circles, events like this, well, they're still somewhat foreign to me. Leonard stared at her in amazement. Are you telling me that you're using me as much as I'm using you? I prefer to think of it as mutual benefit, Amelia said with a mischievous smile. You provide me with unassailable social credentials, and I provide you with a reason to rejoin society. You're remarkable, Leonard said, shaking his head in wonder. Absolutely remarkable. Shall we go? Amelia asked, offering him her arm in a gesture that was both practical and symbolic. The carriage ride to the Pemberton estate was filled with comfortable conversation. Amelia had an easy way of talking that put Leonard at ease, discussing everything from current political events to the latest novels. She treated him exactly as she would any other escort, not with the careful deference he had grown to hate, but with the natural respect due to an equal. Your Grace, she said as they approached their destination, I want you to know that whatever happens tonight, I'm proud to be here with you. Even if I make a complete fool of myself? Leonard asked. Especially then, Amelia replied with a smile, because it would mean you tried. The Pemberton estate was ablaze with lights, and carriages lined the circular drive as London's elite arrived for what was being called the wedding of the decade. Leonard felt his stomach tighten as their carriage joined the queue, but Amelia's steady presence beside him provided an anchor of calm. "Remember," she said quietly as they waited their turn to alight, "you belong here. You always have." When their carriage finally reached the entrance, Leonard took a deep breath and prepared himself for his return to society. The footman who opened the carriage door showed only the slightest hesitation when he saw Leonard's wheelchair, but he quickly composed himself and assisted with the specially designed ramp that Thomas had insisted on bringing. "Your Grace," the footman said respectfully, "welcome to Pemberton House." Leonard maneuvered his wheelchair onto the ramp with practiced ease, grateful for the hours he had spent perfecting his mobility in the privacy of his own home. Amelia walked beside him, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder in a gesture of support that somehow managed to be both intimate and appropriate. The moment they entered the grand foyer, Leonard felt the weight of dozens of stares. Conversation stopped mid-sentence as people turned to gape at the unexpected sight of the Duke of Hartwell making his first society appearance in 3 years. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity before the normal buzz of conversation gradually resumed, though Leonard could feel the continued attention like a physical presence. "Your Grace." Lord Pemberton himself approached, his face showing genuine pleasure at Leonard's presence. "What a delightful surprise. We're honored to have you here." "Lord Pemberton," Leonard replied, offering his hand, "thank you for having us. May I present Miss Amelia Carter?" "Miss Carter," Lord Pemberton said with a bow. "I've heard wonderful things about your charitable work. You're most welcome." As they made their way through the receiving line, Leonard was surprised by the warmth of the reception they received. While there were certainly stares and whispered comments, many of the guests seemed genuinely pleased to see him. Several old friends approached to greet him, and Leonard found himself falling back into the easy social rhythms that had once been second nature. "You see," Amelia murmured as they moved toward the ballroom, "I told you that you belonged here." The ballroom was magnificent, decorated with thousands of white roses and lit by crystal chandeliers that cast a warm glow over the assembled guests. Leonard positioned his wheelchair at the edge of the dance floor, content to observe the festivities, but Amelia had other ideas. "Your Grace," she said, turning to face him with determination in her blue eyes, "I believe you owe me a dance." Leonard felt his heart stop. "Miss Carter, You told me you don't dance anymore," Amelia interrupted. "But you didn't say you couldn't." Before Leonard could protest further, Amelia moved to stand in front of his wheelchair, her hands extended toward him. "Trust me," she said softly. Leonard looked around the ballroom, acutely aware that their exchange was being watched by dozens of curious eyes. The thought of attempting to dance, of potentially making a spectacle of himself, filled him with terror. But as he looked into Amelia's eyes, he saw such complete faith in him that he found himself taking her hands. "I don't know how," he began. "Follow my lead," Amelia said with a smile. "And remember that dancing is about connection, not steps." What happened next would be talked about in London society for years to come. As the orchestra began a waltz, Amelia began to move in a slow, graceful pattern around Leonard's wheelchair, her hands in his, her movements perfectly synchronized with the music. It wasn't traditional dancing, but it was something far more beautiful, a partnership that transcended physical limitations and spoke to something deeper. Leonard found himself swept up in the rhythm, his hands guiding Amelia's movements as she swayed and turned around him. Her skirts flowed like water, her face radiant with joy, and for the first time in 3 years, Leonard felt truly alive. The ballroom had fallen completely silent, every eye fixed on the extraordinary sight of the Duke of Hartwell dancing with Miss Carter. But instead of the mockery or pity Leonard had feared, he saw something else entirely in the faces around them. Wonder, admiration, and perhaps even a touch of envy for the obvious connection between the dancing couple. As the music swelled to its conclusion, Amelia executed a final, graceful turn that brought her to rest beside Leonard's wheelchair, both of them breathing slightly hard and glowing with exhilaration. The silence that followed seemed to last forever. Then, slowly, one person began to clap, then another. Within moments, the entire ballroom erupted in applause, not the polite, obligatory applause of society functions, but genuine, enthusiastic appreciation for what they had just witnessed. Leonard felt tears prick his eyes as he looked around at the sea of smiling faces. For the first time since his accident, He didn't see pity or discomfort in people's expressions. He saw respect, admiration, and perhaps most importantly, acceptance. "You see," Amelia said softly, her hand still in his, "I told you that you were still the most fascinating man in London." As the evening progressed, Leonard found himself at the center of attention in a way he hadn't experienced since before his accident. People sought him out, eager to speak with him, to hear his opinions on current events, to simply be in his presence. The dance with Amelia had somehow transformed him in their eyes from a tragic figure to be pitied into a man, to be admired for his courage and grace. "Your Grace," Lady Pemberton herself approached during a lull in the festivities, "I must tell you how moved I was by your dance with Miss Carter. It was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen at a wedding." "Thank you, Lady Pemberton," Leonard replied. "Miss Carter deserves all the credit. She's a remarkable woman." "Indeed she is," Lady Pemberton agreed, glancing at Amelia with obvious approval. "You're very fortunate to have found each other." Leonard started to correct the assumption that he and Amelia were romantically involved, but something stopped him. As he looked at Amelia, radiant in her emerald gown and surrounded by admirers who were eager to meet the woman who had danced so beautifully with the Duke, he realized that Lady Pemberton might not be wrong after all. He was falling in love with Amelia Carter, and the thought both thrilled and terrified him. Revelations and realizations. The carriage ride home from the wedding was filled with a comfortable silence that spoke of shared triumph. Leonard found himself stealing glances at Amelia, who sat beside him with a satisfied smile playing about her lips, her emerald gown pooling around her in elegant folds. "Well," she said finally, turning to meet his gaze, "I think we can safely say that went better than expected." "Better than expected," Leonard laughed, the sound rusty from disuse but genuine. "Miss Carter, we were the talk of the entire evening. I haven't received so much attention since before my accident." "Good attention," Amelia pointed out. "Respectful attention. The kind of attention you deserve." "Thanks to you," Leonard said seriously. "That dance. Amelia, what you did tonight was extraordinary." "What we did," Amelia corrected gently. "Your Grace, you were magnificent tonight. You reminded everyone in that ballroom why you were once the most respected man in London." Leonard was quiet for a moment, processing the events of the evening. "I had forgotten," he said finally, "what it felt like to be seen as something other than a tragic figure. For 3 years, I've been defined by my limitations rather than my capabilities." "And now?" Amelia asked softly. "Now I remember that I'm still the Duke of Hartwell," Leonard said with growing conviction. "My accident changed my mobility, not my mind or my worth." "Exactly," Amelia said with satisfaction. "Your Grace, may I ask you something personal?" "After tonight, I think we've moved beyond formal courtesies," Leonard said with a smile. "Please call me Leonard, and ask me anything you like." "Leonard," Amelia said, testing his name on her tongue. "What happened to you? I know there was an accident, but I've never heard the details." Leonard's expression grew somber. "A hunting accident 3 years ago. My horse threw me, and I landed badly. The physicians said I was fortunate to survive, but the damage to my spine was extensive." "I'm sorry," Amelia said quietly. "That must have been devastating." "It was," Leonard admitted, "not just the physical limitations, but the way people began to treat me. Suddenly, I went from being a man to be respected to an object of pity. Friends stopped calling, invitations stopped coming, and when they did interact with me, it was with this careful, condescending kindness that made me feel like a child." "So you withdrew," Amelia observed. "I withdrew," Leonard confirmed. "It seemed easier than facing their pity and discomfort. But tonight you showed me that I was wrong to hide away." "You weren't wrong," Amelia said gently. "You were protecting yourself, but you're stronger now, ready to face the world again." "Am I?" Leonard asked. "Or am I simply caught up in the euphoria of one successful evening?" "You're stronger," Amelia said with conviction. "Leonard, what you did tonight took tremendous courage. You faced your fears and emerged victorious." As their carriage pulled up to Hartwell House, Leonard found himself reluctant for the evening to end. "Amelia," he said, as the footman prepared to help them alight, Would you like to come in for tea? I find myself not quite ready for this evening to be over." "I would like that very much," Amelia replied with a warm smile. Leonard's drawing room, lit by the soft glow of the fireplace and several strategically placed lamps, felt intimate and welcoming after the grandeur of the Pemberton ballroom. As they settled themselves, Leonard in his wheelchair position near the fire, Amelia on the sofa beside him. The formality of the evening began to fade away. "Tell me about yourself," Leonard said, as Morrison served tea and then discreetly withdrew. "I realize I know very little about the remarkable woman who just changed my life." Amelia smiled, cradling her teacup in her hands. "There's not much to tell, really. My father made his fortune in shipping and trade. We're what society would call new money, which means we're accepted but never quite belong." "Is that why you understand what it's like to be an outsider?" Leonard asked perceptively. "Partly," Amelia admitted, "but also because I've always been different. I read too much, think too much, ask too many questions. I'm not content to simply marry well and produce heirs like most women of my class." "What do you want?" Leonard asked, genuinely curious. "I want to make a difference," Amelia said with passion. "I want to use my advantages, my education, my resources, my position, to help people who don't have those advantages. I've been working with several charitable organizations, but I want to do more." "Such as?" "I want to establish schools for working-class children," Amelia said, her eyes lighting up with enthusiasm. "Education is the key to breaking the cycle of poverty, but so few children have access to it. I want to change that." Leonard found himself captivated by her passion, her vision for a better world. "That's a noble goal. What's stopping you?" "Credibility," Amelia said with a rueful smile. "I'm a young, unmarried woman from a merchant family. People listen to me politely, but they don't take me seriously. I need allies, influential supporters who can help me turn my dreams into reality." "Allies like a duke?" Leonard asked with growing understanding. "I wasn't thinking of that when I invited you tonight," Amelia said quickly. "I genuinely wanted your company, not your influence." "I believe you," Leonard said, "but that doesn't mean we couldn't help each other. You've shown me that I still have value, still have a role to play in society. Perhaps we could work together to make the difference you're talking about." "You would do that?" Amelia asked, her eyes wide with hope. "I would be honored to do that," Leonard replied. "Amelia, you've given me back my sense of purpose. The least I can do is help you achieve yours." They talked late into the night, sharing stories, dreams, and plans for the future. Leonard found himself more animated than he had been in years, energized by Amelia's passion and intelligence. She, in turn, seemed to blossom under his attention, her ideas becoming more elaborate and ambitious as she realized she had found a true partner in her philanthropic goals. "It's late," Amelia said finally, glancing at the clock on the mantelpiece. "I should go home." "Of course," Leonard said, though he was reluctant to let her leave. "Amelia, thank you. For tonight, for everything. You've given me back my life." "You gave it back to yourself," Amelia replied. "I just reminded you that it was there." As Leonard's carriage took Amelia home through the quiet London streets, both found themselves reflecting on the evening and what it might mean for their future. What had begun as a simple request for an escort had evolved into something much deeper, a partnership, a friendship, and perhaps the beginning of something even more significant. Over the following days, Leonard found himself energized in a way he hadn't experienced since before his accident. Invitations began arriving again, not the pitying, obligatory invitations he had received occasionally over the past 3 years, but genuine requests for his company from people who valued his presence. Word of his triumphant return to society had spread quickly, and suddenly everyone wanted to be associated with the Duke who had danced so beautifully with Miss Carter. "Your Grace," Morrison said one morning as he brought the daily correspondence, "you've received 17 invitations today. Shall I accept them all?" "Not all," Leonard said with amusement. "But yes, I think it's time I rejoined society properly. And Morrison, send a note to Miss Carter. I'd like to call on her this afternoon if she's available." "Very good, Your Grace," Morrison replied with obvious satisfaction. "It's wonderful to see you taking an interest in social activities again." Leonard's visit to the Carter family home that afternoon marked the beginning of what would become a regular routine. He found himself drawn to Amelia's company, energized by her intelligence and passion, inspired by her vision for a better world. They began working together on her educational initiatives, with Leonard using his influence to open doors that had previously been closed to her. "The Duke of Hartwell is here to see you, miss," the Carter family butler announced one afternoon as Amelia worked in her father's study, surrounded by papers and plans for their latest project. "Send him in," Amelia said, quickly organizing her work. "And bring tea, please." Leonard entered the room with the easy confidence that had become his trademark since returning to society. His wheelchair no longer seemed like a limitation, but simply another aspect of his presence, like his dark hair or grey eyes. "Good afternoon, Amelia," he said warmly. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Never, Amelia replied with a smile that lit up her entire face. I was just reviewing the proposals for the Whitechapel School. The local authorities are finally taking us seriously. Excellent news, Leonard said, maneuvering his wheelchair closer to her desk. I told you that having ducal support would make a difference. It's not just the title, Amelia said seriously. It's you, Leonard. Your passion, your intelligence, your genuine commitment to helping others. People respond to that. Leonard felt his heart skip a beat at the warmth in her voice, the way she said his name. Over the past few weeks, their partnership had deepened into something that felt dangerously close to love, though neither had acknowledged it directly. Amelia, he said carefully, may I ask you something? Of course. Why aren't you married? Leonard asked. You're beautiful, intelligent, passionate, well-connected. Surely you've had offers. Amelia was quiet for a moment, her fingers fidgeting with her pen. I have had offers, she said finally. Several, actually, but none from men who wanted me for who I am, rather than what I represent. What do you mean? Some wanted my father's money, Amelia explained. Others wanted a wife who would be content to manage their household and produce their heirs without having opinions or ambitions of her own. None of them wanted a true partner. And is that what you want? Leonard asked softly. A true partner. Yes, Amelia said, meeting his gaze directly. I want someone who sees me as an equal, who values my mind as much as my appearance, who shares my passion for making a difference in the world. Someone like me? Leonard asked, his heart pounding. Someone exactly like you, Amelia replied without hesitation. The silence that followed was charged with emotion and possibility. Leonard felt as though he was standing at a crossroads, with the opportunity to claim something wonderful if only he had the courage to reach for it. Amelia, he said finally, his voice rough with emotion, I need to tell you something. What? She asked softly. I'm falling in love with you, Leonard said, the words tumbling out before he could second-guess himself. I know I have nothing to offer you but a damaged body and a complicated life, but I can't pretend anymore that my feelings are purely platonic. Amelia's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of joy rather than sorrow. Leonard, she said, rising from her chair and moving to kneel beside his wheelchair, you have everything to offer me. Your intelligence, your kindness, your strength, your passion for justice, those are the things that matter. Your accident doesn't diminish your worth in my eyes. Are you saying, Leonard began, hardly daring to hope. I'm saying that I love you too, Amelia said, taking his hands in hers. I've loved you since that first day when you agreed to escort me to the wedding. You're the partner I've been looking for, the man who sees me as I truly am and loves me for it. Leonard leaned forward and kissed her then, a kiss that was tender and passionate and full of promise for the future. When they broke apart, both were breathless and glowing with happiness. Marry me, Leonard said urgently. Amelia, marry me, and let's build the life we both want together. Yes, Amelia said without hesitation. Yes, Leonard, I'll marry you. As they held each other in the afternoon sunlight streaming through the study windows, both knew that they had found something rare and precious. A love that transcended physical limitations and social expectations, a partnership that would allow them both to become the best versions of themselves. The Duke of Hartwell had indeed returned to society, but more importantly, he had found his way back to life, love, and purpose. And it had all begun with a simple invitation to a wedding from a remarkable woman who had seen past his wheelchair to the man beneath. Challenges and triumphs. The announcement of the engagement between Duke Leonard Hartwell and Miss Amelia Carter sent shockwaves through London society. While their partnership at Lady Pemberton's wedding had been the subject of much admiration and speculation, few had expected it to lead to marriage. The reaction was swift and varied. Some celebrated the romantic triumph of love over adversity, while others questioned the wisdom of such an unconventional union. Your Grace, Morrison said one morning as he brought Leonard's correspondence, his expression more troubled than usual, I'm afraid some of today's letters are less than congratulatory. Leonard set aside the architectural plans he had been reviewing for Amelia's first school and reached for the stack of letters. Let me see the worst of it, he said with resignation. The first letter from his late father's oldest friend, Lord Pemberton, was blunt in its disapproval. Leonard, while I admire Miss Carter's spirit, you must consider your duty to your title. The Hartwell line requires strong heirs, and your condition makes the future of your estates uncertain. Perhaps a marriage of convenience to a woman of proven fertility would be more appropriate. Leonard crumpled the letter with disgust. Proven fertility, he muttered, as though Amelia were a broodmare to be evaluated. The second letter was from his cousin, next in line to inherit the dukedom, and was even more offensive. Leonard, I understand your gratitude to Miss Carter for her kindness, but surely you can express that gratitude without marriage. Your accident has already damaged the family reputation enough without adding the scandal of an inappropriate union. Shall I burn these, Your Grace? Morrison asked, his own distaste for the letters evident. No, Leonard said grimly. File them away. I want to remember who showed their true character during this time. Fortunately, the negative responses were balanced by an equal number of supportive messages. Lord Blackwood, whose own marriage to a commoner had caused scandal 20 years earlier, wrote, Leonard, pay no attention to the narrow-minded fools who question your choice. Miss Carter is a remarkable woman, and your partnership will be a force for good in this world. Margaret and I look forward to welcoming you both to our circle. Even more touching was a letter from the Duchess of Marlborough, one of society's most influential women. Your Grace, your dance with Miss Carter at the Pemberton wedding was the most beautiful display of true partnership I have ever witnessed. Any fool can see that you are perfectly matched in intelligence, spirit, and purpose. I shall be honored to sponsor Miss Carter's introduction to the highest circles of society. The support outweighs the criticism, Leonard told Amelia when he called on her that afternoon, though I confess some of the negative responses have been quite vicious. I expected as much, Amelia said calmly, though Leonard could see the hurt in her blue eyes. A duke marrying a merchant's daughter is scandalous enough without adding the complication of your wheelchair. Do you regret accepting my proposal? Leonard asked, suddenly worried that the social pressure might be too much for her. Never, Amelia said firmly, moving to sit beside his wheelchair and taking his hand. Leonard, I knew what we were facing when I said yes. I'm not some fragile flower who wilts at the first sign of criticism. No, Leonard agreed with a smile. You're definitely not that. But I worry about the toll this will take on you, on your family. My family supports us completely, Amelia assured him. Father says he's never seen me happier, and Mother is already planning the wedding. As for society's opinion, well, we'll change their minds through our actions, not our words. Speaking of actions, Leonard said, producing a folder from his jacket, I have some news about the Whitechapel school project. Good news, I hope, Amelia asked, her eyes lighting up with interest. The best, Leonard confirmed. The Board of Education has approved our proposal, and we've received funding commitments from 6 different benefactors. We can break ground next month. Amelia's squeal of delight was so unladylike and so genuine that Leonard couldn't help but laugh. Really? Truly? We're actually going to build our school? We're going to build our school, Leonard confirmed. The first of many, if this one succeeds as I believe it will. Oh, Leonard, Amelia said, throwing her arms around his neck in an embrace that was both joyful and intimate. This is wonderful. Think of all the children we'll be able to help, all the lives we'll be able to change. Think of the legacy we'll be building together, Leonard added softly. Amelia, this is just the beginning. With your vision and my resources, we can transform education for the working class throughout London. Their celebration was interrupted by the arrival of Amelia's father, Mr. Carter, a distinguished man in his 50s who had built his shipping empire through hard work and shrewd business sense. Your Grace, he said with a respectful bow, I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Not at all, Mr. Carter, Leonard replied. We were just celebrating some good news about our educational project. Excellent, Mr. Carter said with genuine pleasure. I'm glad to see my daughter's dreams becoming reality. Your Grace, I was hoping I might have a word with you privately. Of course, Leonard said, though he noticed Amelia's slight frown of concern. I'll just go check on the wedding preparations, Amelia said tactfully, kissing Leonard's cheek before leaving the 2 men alone. Your Grace, Mr. Carter began once they were alone. I want to thank you for making my daughter so happy. I haven't seen her this radiant since she was a child. She makes me happy as well, Leonard replied. More than I thought possible. I'm glad to hear it, Mr. Carter said. Your Grace, I hope you won't take offense at what I'm about to say, but I need to know that your intentions toward Amelia are completely honorable. Mr. Carter, Leonard said, straightening in his wheelchair, I can assure you that my love for your daughter is genuine and my intentions are entirely honorable. I would never do anything to harm her. I believe you, Mr. Carter said. But Your Grace, There are those who are saying that you're marrying Amelia out of gratitude, or loneliness, or some misguided sense of obligation. I need to know that's not true." Leonard was quiet for a moment, understanding the older man's concern. "Mr. Carter, may I speak frankly?" "Please do." "When I had my accident 3 years ago, I thought my life was over," Leonard said. "Not because I couldn't walk, but because I couldn't see any purpose or meaning in my existence. I withdrew from society, from my friends, from everything that had once mattered to me. I was existing, not living." "And then you met Amelia," Mr. Carter observed. "And then I met Amelia," Leonard confirmed. "But not in the way you might think. She didn't rescue me, or fix me, or make me whole again. What she did was show me that I had never been broken in the first place. She saw past my wheelchair to the man I still was, and she challenged me to see myself the same way." "Go on," Mr. Carter said, clearly moved by Leonard's words. "I love your daughter not because she saved me, but because she's the most remarkable woman I've ever known," Leonard continued. "She's intelligent, passionate, kind, brave, everything I could want in a partner. The fact that she loves me despite my limitations is a gift I'll never take for granted." "And children?" Mr. Carter asked delicately. "Amelia wants children, Your Grace. She's always dreamed of having a family." "So have I," Leonard said firmly. "Mr. Carter, my accident affected my legs, not my ability to father children. We've consulted with physicians, and there's no reason why we can't have a family together." "I'm glad to hear it," Mr. Carter said with obvious relief. "Your Grace, you have my blessing and my support. Welcome to the family." The wedding preparations proceeded at a rapid pace, with both families throwing themselves into the planning with enthusiasm. Leonard had initially suggested a small, private ceremony to avoid the spectacle that a large society wedding might create, but Amelia had other ideas. "Absolutely not," she said when he proposed a quiet ceremony. "Leonard, we're not going to hide away as though we're ashamed of our love. We're going to have a proper wedding with all our friends and family present, and we're going to show society that our union is something to be celebrated, not whispered about." "But the attention, the speculation," Leonard began. "Let them speculate," Amelia said firmly. "By the time they see us together, see how happy we are, see the work we're doing together, they'll understand that this marriage is about love, not pity or convenience." "You're determined to make a statement," Leonard observed with amusement. "I'm determined to make a point," Amelia corrected. "That love comes in many forms, that strength isn't measured by physical ability, and that the most beautiful partnerships are built on mutual respect and shared purpose." The wedding was set for December, in the grand cathedral where Leonard's family had been married for generations. The guest list included everyone from members of Parliament to the children from the charitable organizations Amelia supported. It would be, as the society papers proclaimed, the wedding of the year. "Your Grace," Thomas said, as he helped Leonard prepare for the final fitting of his wedding attire, "if I may say so, you look happier than I've ever seen you." "I'm happier than I've ever been," Leonard confirmed. "Thomas, do you think I'm making the right choice?" "Your Grace," Thomas said with the familiarity of long service, "I've watched you for 3 years struggle to find meaning and purpose after your accident. In the past few months since you met Miss Carter, you've become the man you were always meant to be, not despite your wheelchair, but including it as part of who you are. If that's not love, I don't know what is." "Thank you, Thomas," Leonard said, moved by his valet's words. "That means more to me than you know." As the wedding day approached, Leonard found himself filled with a sense of anticipation and joy that he had never experienced before. He was about to marry the woman he loved, embark on a life of shared purpose and passion, and prove to the world that true partnership transcended any physical limitation. The night before the wedding, as he sat in his study reviewing his vows one final time, Leonard reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. 3 years ago, he had been a broken man who saw no future beyond his limitations. Tomorrow, he would become a husband, a partner, and hopefully someday a father. Not in spite of his wheelchair, but as a complete man who happened to use one. Amelia had given him many gifts, her love, her faith in him, her vision for their future together. But perhaps the greatest gift was the way she had helped him see himself, not as a tragic figure to be pitied, but as a man worthy of love, respect, and happiness. Tomorrow would mark not just the beginning of their marriage, but the continuation of a love story that had already changed both their lives and would, Leonard was certain, continue to inspire others for years to come. The wedding of the year, December 15th, 1824, dawned crisp and clear, with winter sunlight streaming through the tall windows of St. Paul's Cathedral. The ancient church had been transformed for the occasion, with thousands of white roses and evergreen boughs creating a winter wonderland that took the breath away from every guest who entered. Leonard arrived early, wanting to ensure that all the special arrangements for his wheelchair were in place. The cathedral staff had worked tirelessly to create a seamless path from the entrance to the altar, and a special platform had been constructed so that he could stand at the same level as his bride during the ceremony. "Your Grace," the Archbishop himself approached, resplendent in his ceremonial robes, "everything is prepared according to your specifications. I must say it's an honor to officiate at such a significant occasion." "Thank you, Your Grace," Leonard replied, using the formal address for the church official. "I appreciate your understanding and accommodation." "Nonsense," the Archbishop said warmly. "Love is love regardless of the circumstances. Today we celebrate not just your union with Miss Carter, but the triumph of the human spirit over adversity." As the guests began to arrive, Leonard positioned himself at the altar and watched the cathedral fill with an extraordinary cross-section of London society. In the front pews sat members of Parliament, dukes and duchesses, and the most influential families in England. Behind them were the merchants and professionals who formed the backbone of London's growing middle class. And scattered throughout were the teachers, charity workers, and even some of the children from Amelia's educational programs, all dressed in their finest clothes for the occasion. "It's quite a gathering," observed Lord Blackwood, who was serving as Leonard's best man. "I don't think I've ever seen such a diverse group at a society wedding." "That's Amelia's influence," Leonard said with pride. "She insisted that everyone who has been important in our lives should be here to witness our union." "She's remarkable," Lord Blackwood agreed. "Leonard, I hope you know how fortunate you are." "I know," Leonard said softly. "Believe me, I know." The organ began to play, and a hush fell over the cathedral as the processional began. First came Amelia's bridesmaids, her sister and 3 close friends, dressed in deep blue silk that complemented the winter theme. Then the music swelled into the traditional wedding march, and every head turned toward the back of the cathedral. Leonard's breath caught in his throat as Amelia appeared at the entrance, her arm linked with her father's. She wore a gown of ivory silk that seemed to glow in the cathedral's light, with intricate beadwork that caught and reflected the winter sunlight streaming through the stained glass windows. Her honey-blonde hair was arranged in an elegant style beneath a delicate veil, and she carried a bouquet of white roses and winter greenery. But it wasn't her beauty that made Leonard's heart race. It was the radiant joy on her face as their eyes met across the length of the cathedral. She was walking toward him with the confidence of a woman who knew exactly what she wanted and was about to claim it. As she made her way down the aisle, Leonard was aware of the whispered comments from the guests, but for once they were comments of admiration rather than pity. "She's beautiful," he heard someone say. "They're perfect together," he heard someone say. "Look how happy they both are," came another whisper. "This is what true love looks like," added a third voice. When Amelia reached the altar, her father placed her hand in Leonard's with obvious emotion. "Take care of my daughter," Mr. Carter said quietly. "With my life," Leonard replied, his voice thick with emotion. As Amelia took her place beside him on the specially constructed platform, Leonard marveled at how natural it felt to have her there. She had insisted on modifications to the traditional ceremony so that they would stand as equals, literally and figuratively, during their vows. "Dearly beloved," the Archbishop began, his voice carrying clearly throughout the cathedral, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of Leonard James Hartwell, Duke of Hartwell, and Amelia Rose Carter in the bonds of holy matrimony. This is not merely a joining of 2 hearts, but a celebration of love's power to transcend all obstacles and create something beautiful and lasting." Leonard felt tears prick his eyes at the Archbishop's words. 3 years ago, he would never have believed that he could stand here, about to marry the woman he loved, surrounded by friends and family, who celebrated rather than pitied his circumstances. "Marriage," the Archbishop continued, "is a partnership of equals, built on mutual respect, shared purpose, and unwavering commitment. Today, Leonard and Amelia pledge not just to love each other, but to support each other's dreams, to face life's challenges together, and to build a legacy that will benefit generations to come." When it came time for their personal vows, Leonard went first, his voice steady and clear as he spoke the words he had written from his heart. "Amelia," he began, his grey eyes fixed on her radiant face. 3 years ago, I believed my life was over. I had lost not just the use of my legs, but my sense of purpose, my connection to the world, my hope for the future. I was existing in shadows, convinced that I had nothing left to offer anyone. The cathedral was completely silent, every guest hanging on his words. Then you walked into my study with a simple request to escort you to a wedding. But what you were really offering was something far more precious, the chance to see myself through your eyes. You saw not a broken man to be pitied, but a whole person worthy of respect and love. You challenged me to remember who I was beneath my limitations, and you gave me the courage to reclaim my place in the world. Leonard paused, his voice becoming even more tender. Today, I promise to love you, not just with my heart, but with my mind, my soul, my entire being. I promise to support your dreams as you have supported mine, to stand beside you as an equal partner in all our endeavors. I promise to face whatever challenges life brings us with courage, knowing that together we can overcome anything. And I promise to spend every day of my life proving myself worthy of the extraordinary gift of your love. There wasn't a dry eye in the cathedral as Leonard finished his vows. Even the Archbishop had to pause for a moment to compose himself before nodding to Amelia. Leonard, Amelia began, her voice strong despite the tears streaming down her cheeks. When I first asked you to escort me to a wedding, I thought I was simply seeking the company of an interesting man for an evening. I had no idea that I was about to meet my soulmate, my partner, the other half of my heart. She paused, her blue eyes shining with love and determination. You have taught me that true strength comes not from never falling, but from rising each time we do. You have shown me that dignity is not about perfection, but about grace in the face of adversity. You have proven that the most beautiful partnerships are built not on what we can do for each other, but on who we become when we're together. Amelia's voice grew stronger as she continued. Today, I promise to love you completely and unconditionally, in sickness and in health, in triumph and in struggle. I promise to see you always as you truly are, not a duke who happens to use a wheelchair, but a remarkable man who happens to be a duke. I promise to work beside you to build the better world we both envision, to raise our children to understand that worth is measured by character, not circumstance. And I promise to spend every day of my life grateful for the miracle of finding you. As they exchanged rings, Leonard's grandmother's diamond for Amelia, a new gold band for Leonard, the symbolism was not lost on anyone present. These were not just tokens of love, but symbols of a partnership that would change both their lives and the lives of countless others. By the power vested in me by God and the Church of England, the Archbishop proclaimed, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Leonard, you may kiss your bride. The kiss that followed was tender, passionate, and full of promise for the future. When they broke apart, both were glowing with happiness, and the cathedral erupted in applause that seemed to go on forever. Ladies and gentlemen, the Archbishop announced with obvious pleasure, I present to you the Duke and Duchess of Hartwell. As they made their way back down the aisle together, Leonard's wheelchair moving smoothly beside Amelia's graceful steps, the guests rose in a standing ovation that was unprecedented for a society wedding. But this was no ordinary society wedding. This was a celebration of love's triumph over adversity, of courage in the face of convention, of two remarkable people who had found in each other the perfect partner. The reception was held at Hartwell House, which had been transformed into a winter palace for the occasion. The ballroom glittered with thousands of candles and crystal chandeliers, while the gardens had been enclosed in heated pavilions, decorated with evergreens and white flowers. Your Grace, the Duchess of Marlborough approached Amelia during the receiving line. I must tell you that your wedding was the most moving ceremony I have ever attended. You and the Duke are an inspiration to us all. Thank you, Your Grace, Amelia replied with genuine warmth. Your support has meant the world to us. And well deserved, the Duchess continued. I understand you're planning to expand your educational work now that you have ducal resources at your disposal. We are indeed, Amelia confirmed. Leonard and I believe that education is the key to breaking the cycle of poverty and creating a more just society. Admirable goals, the Duchess said approvingly. You may count on my support for your endeavors. As the evening progressed, Leonard found himself amazed by the warmth and genuine affection shown by their guests. The dance floor was filled with couples celebrating not just his marriage to Amelia, but the love story that had captured London's imagination. "Your Grace," Lord Pemberton approached during a lull in the festivities, "I owe you an apology. My letter before your engagement was inappropriate. I see now how wrong I was about your union with the Duchess." "Thank you for saying so," Leonard replied graciously, though he had not forgotten the man's earlier criticism. "Watching you two together tonight," Lord Pemberton continued, "seeing the obvious love and respect between you, I realized that I was judging your situation by outdated standards. You've shown us all what a true partnership looks like." "We've been fortunate to find each other," Leonard said diplomatically. "Indeed you have," Lord Pemberton agreed. "Your Grace, if there's anything I can do to support your educational initiatives, please don't hesitate to ask. I'd be honored to contribute to such worthy causes." As the evening reached its crescendo, Leonard and Amelia took to the dance floor for their first dance as husband and wife. The orchestra played the same waltz they had danced to at Lady Pemberton's wedding, and once again, Amelia moved around Leonard's wheelchair with grace and beauty that took everyone's breath away. But this time, there was something different in their dance, a deeper intimacy, a perfect synchronization that spoke of two souls who had truly become one. As they moved together, Leonard guiding Amelia's steps while she provided the flowing movement, it was clear to everyone watching that this was not a dance of accommodation or charity, but of perfect partnership. "You see?" Amelia murmured as they danced, her eyes sparkling with joy. "I told you we would show them what true love looks like." "You were right," Leonard replied, his voice filled with wonder. "About everything, Amelia. I love you more than I ever thought possible." "And I love you," Amelia replied, "my husband, my partner, my heart." As the dance ended, and the guests erupted in applause once again, Leonard knew that this was just the beginning of their story together. They had proven that love could triumph over any obstacle, that true partnership transcended physical limitations, and that the most beautiful relationships were built on mutual respect and shared purpose. Building a legacy. 6 months after their wedding, Leonard and Amelia stood together in the courtyard of their first completed school in Whitechapel, watching as children from the surrounding tenements streamed through the doors for their first day of classes. The building was modest but well designed, with large windows to let in natural light and modern heating systems to ensure the children's comfort. "Look at them," Amelia said softly, her hand resting on Leonard's shoulder as they watched the excited children. "So eager to learn, so full of hope." "Thanks to you," Leonard replied, covering her hand with his. "This was your vision, your dream." "Our dream," Amelia corrected gently. "Leonard, none of this would have been possible without your support, your connections, your resources. And none of it would have happened without your passion and determination," Leonard countered. "Amelia, you've changed my life in ways I never thought possible. Before I met you, I was focused entirely on my own limitations. Now I see possibilities everywhere." Their conversation was interrupted by the approach of Mrs. Henderson, the school's headmistress, a capable woman in her 40s who had previously taught at one of London's most prestigious girls' schools, before accepting Amelia's offer to lead this revolutionary educational experiment. "Your Graces," she said with a respectful curtsy, "the children are all settled in their classrooms. Would you like to observe the first lessons?" "We would be delighted," Amelia replied immediately. As they made their way through the school, Leonard's wheelchair navigating easily through the corridors that had been designed with accessibility in mind, they could hear the sounds of learning beginning, children reciting their letters, the scratch of chalk on slate boards, the patient voices of teachers explaining basic arithmetic. "This is remarkable," Leonard said as they paused outside a classroom where a group of 8-year-olds were learning to read. 6 months ago, most of these children had never held a book. Now look at them. "Education changes everything," Amelia said with satisfaction. "Give a child the ability to read and write, and you give them the tools to change their entire life." "Your Grace," one of the teachers approached them, "might I introduce you to young Thomas Morrison? He's one of our most promising students." A boy of perhaps 10 years old stepped forward, his clothes clean but obviously mended, his face bright with intelligence and curiosity. "Your Grace," he said with a careful bow, "thank you for building our school. My mum says I'm going to learn to read as well as any gentleman." "I'm sure you will," Leonard replied warmly. "And what would you like to do when you grow up, Thomas?" "I want to be a teacher, Your Grace," the boy replied without hesitation. "So I can help other children learn like you've helped me." Leonard felt his throat tighten with emotion. "That's a wonderful goal, Thomas. Work hard, and I'm sure you'll achieve it." As they continued their tour, Leonard and Amelia were struck by the transformation they were witnessing. These children, who had been destined for lives of poverty and ignorance, were being given the tools to create better futures for themselves and their families. "We need to expand," Amelia said as they returned to their carriage. "Leonard, there are dozens of neighborhoods in London that need schools like this one." "I agree," Leonard said immediately. "I've been corresponding with several potential benefactors who are interested in supporting our work. Lord Blackwood has offered to fund a school in his district, and the Duchess of Marlborough wants to establish one specifically for girls." "Really?" Amelia's eyes lit up with excitement. "Leonard, we could have a network of schools across London within 5 years. We could have more than that," Leonard said with growing enthusiasm. "Amelia, what if we expanded beyond London? What if we created a model that could be replicated throughout England?" "You're thinking big," Amelia said with admiration. "I'm thinking like my wife," Leonard replied with a smile. "You've taught me that if we're going to dream, we might as well dream large." Their educational work was not their only success. In the months following their wedding, Leonard had gradually returned to his former prominence in society, but with a new focus and purpose. Instead of the shallow social climbing that had characterized much of his pre-accident life, he now used his influence to advocate for social reform and charitable causes. "Your Grace," his secretary announced one afternoon as Leonard worked in his study, "Lord Melbourne's office has sent a message. The Prime Minister would like to meet with you about your education bill." Leonard's heart raced with excitement. For months, he had been working on legislation that would provide government funding for schools in working-class neighborhoods. The fact that the Prime Minister was willing to discuss it suggested that their grassroots efforts were beginning to have an impact at the highest levels of government. "Send word that I'll be available at his convenience," Leonard replied, "and ask the Duchess to join me when she returns from her meeting with the Ladies' Charitable Society." Amelia had thrown herself into London's charitable community with characteristic passion, quickly becoming one of its most influential members. Her combination of practical intelligence, genuine compassion, and ducal connections made her a formidable advocate for social reform. "How did your meeting go?" Leonard asked when Amelia returned home that evening, her cheeks flushed with excitement. "Wonderfully," Amelia replied, settling into the chair beside his desk. "The Ladies' Charitable Society has agreed to fund 3 new schools, and Lady Pemberton, yes, the same Lady Pemberton whose wedding brought us together, has offered to host a fundraising ball for our cause." "That's excellent news," Leonard said with satisfaction, "and I have news as well. Lord Melbourne wants to discuss our education bill." "Leonard, that's wonderful," Amelia exclaimed. "Do you think he's considering supporting it?" "I think our work has gotten his attention," Leonard replied carefully. "The success of the Whitechapel School, combined with the support we've garnered from influential families, has made it impossible for the government to ignore the need for educational reform." "We're actually going to change things," Amelia said with wonder. "Leonard, when I first dreamed of improving education for working-class children, I never imagined we could have this kind of impact." "You underestimated yourself," Leonard said, taking her hand. "Amelia, you have a gift for inspiring people to be better than they thought they could be. You've certainly done that for me. We've done it for each other," Amelia replied softly. "Leonard, I have something to tell you." Something in her tone made Leonard look at her more closely. "What is it?" "I saw the physician today," Amelia said, her eyes sparkling with joy. "Leonard, we're going to have a baby." Leonard felt the world stop spinning for a moment as the news sank in. "A baby?" he repeated, hardly daring to believe it. "A baby," Amelia confirmed, laughing at his stunned expression. "Our child, Leonard, due in the spring." Leonard's whoop of joy could be heard throughout Hartwell House. He pulled Amelia into his arms, holding her as close as his wheelchair would allow, both of them laughing and crying with happiness. "Are you happy?" Amelia asked, though his reaction had made the answer obvious. "I'm ecstatic," Leonard replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Amelia, a child, our child. I can hardly believe it." "Believe it," Amelia said, placing his hand on her still flat stomach. "In a few months, we're going to be parents." "What kind of world are we bringing this child into?" Leonard asked, suddenly serious. "A better world than the one we inherited," Amelia replied firmly. "A world where children are valued regardless of their birth, where education is available to all, where love matters more than convention. That's the legacy we're building, Leonard. That's what we're giving our child." As they held each other in the lamplight of Leonard's study, both felt the weight and wonder of the future they were creating together. They had already proven that love could triumph over adversity, that partnership could overcome any obstacle, that two people committed to a shared vision could change the world. Now they would have the opportunity to pass those lessons on to the next generation, to raise a child who would understand from birth that worth was measured by character, not circumstance, and that the greatest achievements came from lifting others up rather than climbing over them. "What do you think our child will be like?" Amelia asked dreamily. "Strong," Leonard said immediately. "Like their mother, and determined to make the world better. Like both their parents." "Boy or girl?" Amelia wondered. "It doesn't matter," Leonard said firmly. "Boy or girl, this child will know they're loved unconditionally, that they can achieve anything they set their mind to, and that their parents' love story began with a simple act of courage that changed everything." "Speaking of courage," Amelia said with a mischievous smile, "I have an idea for our next project." "What kind of idea?" Leonard asked, though he was already smiling at her enthusiasm. "A training college for teachers," Amelia said, her eyes lighting up with excitement. "Leonard, we're building schools, but we need qualified teachers to staff them. What if we created an institution specifically designed to train working-class men and women to become educators?" "You want to revolutionize not just education, but who provides it," Leonard said with admiration. "Exactly," Amelia confirmed. "Why should teaching be limited to those who can afford expensive university educations? Some of the best teachers I've met are people who understand what it's like to struggle, who can relate to their students' experiences." "It's a brilliant idea," Leonard said immediately. "Controversial, certainly. Revolutionary, absolutely. But brilliant." "So you'll support it?" Amelia asked. "I'll do more than support it," Leonard replied. "I'll help you make it happen. Amelia, together, we're going to transform education in England." As they began to plan their latest venture, both were filled with the sense of purpose and possibility that had characterized their relationship from the beginning. They had found in each other not just love, but partnership, inspiration, and the courage to dream bigger than either had ever imagined possible. The Duke of Hartwell had indeed returned to society, but he had brought with him a new vision of what nobility could mean, not just privilege and position, but responsibility and service. And beside him stood a duchess who had proven that true strength came not from birth or beauty, but from the courage to stand up for what was right and the determination to make it happen. Together, they were building a legacy that would outlast their lifetimes, creating a better world for their child and countless others. And it had all begun with a simple invitation to a wedding from a remarkable woman who had seen past a wheelchair to the man beneath, a man who had been waiting for someone brave enough to ask him to dance. The dance continues. 5 years later, Leonard sat in the garden of Hartwell House, watching his 3-year-old daughter, Victoria, chase butterflies among the roses, while his wife worked at a nearby table, reviewing plans for their latest educational initiative. At 7 months pregnant with their second child, Amelia moved more slowly than usual, but her energy and enthusiasm remained undimmed. "Papa!" Victoria called, running toward him with a flower clutched in her small fist. "Look what I found!" "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Leonard said, lifting his daughter onto his lap. Victoria had inherited her mother's blonde hair and blue eyes, but she had her father's determined chin and fearless spirit. "Can we dance, Papa?" Victoria asked, as she did every afternoon. "Of course we can," Leonard replied, setting her on her feet and taking her small hands in his. What followed was a miniature version of the dance that had made Leonard and Amelia famous throughout London society. Victoria moved around her father's wheelchair with the unconscious grace of a child who had never known any other way of dancing, her laughter filling the garden as Leonard guided her steps. "She's going to be a heartbreaker," Amelia observed with a smile, looking up from her work. "She's going to be whatever she wants to be," Leonard corrected. "Just like her mother." "Speaking of which," Amelia said, "I received a letter today from Thomas Morrison. Do you remember him? The boy from our first school who wanted to become a teacher?" "Of course I remember him," Leonard said. "What's he doing now?" "He's graduated from our teacher training college and has been appointed headmaster of the new school in Manchester," Amelia said with obvious pride. "At 21, he's the youngest headmaster in England." "That's wonderful news," Leonard said with satisfaction. "How many schools do we have now?" 37, Amelia replied immediately, with 12 more planned for next year. "Leonard, we're actually doing it. We're changing the face of education in England." "We're changing more than that," Leonard observed. "We're changing how society thinks about potential, about worth, about what's possible when people are given opportunities." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Morrison, who approached with his usual dignified bearing despite his obvious excitement. "Your Graces," he said with a bow, "a messenger has just arrived from Parliament. The Education Reform Act has passed both houses and received royal assent. Your legislation is now the law of the land." Leonard and Amelia stared at each other in stunned silence for a moment, before the full impact of the news hit them. The bill that would provide government funding for schools in working-class neighborhoods, the legislation they had worked on for years, had finally become reality. "We did it," Amelia whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Leonard, we actually did it." "You did it," Leonard corrected, though his own eyes were bright with unshed tears. "This was your dream, your vision." "Our dream," Amelia insisted, just as she had 5 years earlier. "Our vision, our work, our victory." As they celebrated their triumph, both reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. What had begun as a simple request for an escort to a wedding had evolved into a love story that had captured the imagination of London society and a partnership that was literally changing the world. "Mama, Papa, why are you crying?" Victoria asked, with the concern of a child who had never seen her parents anything but happy. "We're crying because we're happy, sweetheart," Amelia explained, lifting their daughter into her arms. "Sometimes when something wonderful happens, grown-ups cry happy tears. Like when baby brother comes?" Victoria asked, patting her mother's rounded stomach. "Exactly like that," Leonard confirmed with a smile. As the sun set over the gardens of Hartwell House, the family settled together on the terrace, Victoria curled up on her father's lap, while Amelia rested in the chair beside them. In the distance, they could see the lights of London beginning to twinkle, and Leonard thought about all the children who would benefit from the legislation they had just helped pass. "What's next?" he asked Amelia, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "University scholarships for working-class students," Amelia replied without hesitation. "If we're going to truly break the cycle of poverty, we need to provide opportunities for higher education as well." "Of course," Leonard said with amusement. "I should have known you'd already be planning our next campaign." "We've proven that change is possible," Amelia said with determination. "Why would we stop now?" "We wouldn't," Leonard agreed. "We couldn't. Amelia, you've taught me that the greatest privilege of wealth and position is the opportunity to use them in service of others. And you've taught me that true partnership means supporting each other's dreams until they become reality," Amelia replied. As they prepared to go inside for the evening, Leonard reflected on how completely his life had changed since that morning 5 years ago when Amelia had appeared in his study with her unexpected invitation. He had gone from a man who saw only limitations to one who saw infinite possibilities, from someone who hid from society to someone who helped shape it, from a person defined by his disability to a man defined by his achievements and his love. "Leonard," Amelia said softly as they settled Victoria in her nursery, "do you ever regret it? The accident, I mean. If it hadn't happened, we might never have met." Leonard considered the question seriously. "I regret the pain it caused, the years I wasted feeling sorry for myself," he said finally. "But regret the accident itself? No, because you're right. If it hadn't happened, I might never have met you. I might have remained the shallow, self-centered man I was before, focused only on my own pleasure and position." "You were never shallow," Amelia protested. "I was," Leonard insisted gently. "But you helped me discover depths I never knew I had. You helped me become the man I was meant to be." "We helped each other become who we were meant to be," Amelia corrected, as she always did. As they retired to their own chambers, both carried with them the deep satisfaction that comes from a life well lived and love well chosen. They had proven that the most extraordinary partnerships often begin with the simplest acts of courage, that true love sees past surface limitations to the person beneath, and that two people committed to a shared vision can indeed change the world. The dance that had begun at Lady Pemberton's wedding continued still, evolving and deepening with each passing year. It was no longer just a dance between a duke and a duchess, but a dance of partnership, purpose, and possibility that would inspire generations to come. In the nursery, young Victoria slept peacefully, unaware that she was the daughter of two people who had revolutionized education in England, who had proven that love could triumph over any obstacle, and who had built a legacy of service and compassion that would outlast their lifetimes. And in a few months, she would have a sibling to share in that legacy, A child who would grow up knowing that worth was measured by character rather than circumstance, that the greatest achievements came from lifting others up, and that sometimes the most important thing you could do was ask someone to dance. The Duke and Duchess of Hartwell had indeed shocked society with their unconventional love story, but in the end, they had done something far more important. They had shown the world what was possible when two people had the courage to see past limitations to possibilities, to choose love over convention, and to use their blessings in service of others. Their dance would continue for many years to come, a testament to the power of love, courage, and the simple truth that the most beautiful partnerships are built not on what we can do for each other, but on what we can accomplish together. Leonard and Amelia's story reminds us that our greatest limitations often become our greatest strengths when we have the courage to see them differently. Their journey teaches us that true love sees past physical circumstances to the heart beneath, that real partnership is built on mutual respect and shared purpose, and that the most meaningful achievements come from using our blessings to lift others up. Their dance, both literal and metaphorical, shows us that there are many ways to move through life with grace, dignity, and joy. Sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply asking someone to dance, seeing their worth when others see only limitations, and choosing love over convention. May their love story inspire you to look beyond surface appearances to the extraordinary potential in every person, to believe that true partnership can overcome any obstacle, and to remember that the most beautiful dances are those where both partners help each other shine. Subscribe for more captivating historical romances where love conquers all obstacles and true partnership changes the world. Discover stories that prove courage comes in many forms. Comment: which moment in Leonard and Amelia's journey inspired you most? Your next heart-lifting romance adventure awaits.